Okay, we're back here in our second video for week one. We're going to be continuing our discussion of the details of the first week. So we just spoke of in the last video arguing a position. So we're going to move into what are the key features of an argument position paper, argument within a position paper. What is that? What are those key features? What do we need to see in that type of a paper? Well, first, the paper should begin with an introduction. It should begin with a background. It's very important to provide your reader with the necessary background information to be able to get the context of what your argument is. It's important for the reader to understand what is the history behind your argument. If you just come out and just state your argument, the reader, though they might agree with you, they're going to lack the necessary information to build an intelligent agreement. Okay, it might sound reasonable what you're arguing, but you want to give them the background information so they can invest in what you're saying, so they can, in a sense, be introduced to the topic. A good way to look at it is that you want your topic really to shake hands with your reader, become acquainted with your reader, between the reader and the actual topic that you're going to discuss. So the background information, just like if you were going to introduce yourself or introduce another person to someone, you provide background information. I'm Professor Hannah. I teach at CBU Online. I teach Eng123. Those are some background details about me that may lead into an argument. So you want to provide that information. Now, it should be substantive. It shouldn't just be a brief 3-sentence paragraph. It should be a substantive paragraph that provides the context of the argument. That might involve historical information. That might involve technical information. You want to situate and align your argument with that historical, technical context. So you want your reader to be aligned with that context so that when they hear or when they read your claim or your position, that connection is made. Okay, I see what that context is, and I see how this argument fits into that, and okay, I can now begin to understand what's coming next as far as the evidence that you're going to provide. With that introduction paragraph, half a page, 3/4 of a page of a paragraph, is going to cap with your thesis statement. So the thesis statement would in a sense be a conclusion to that introduction or background information that you gave. It's a lead up to your argument. So therefore, one may argue, this is a good way to cue the reader to that argument, to that claim that you're going to make in light of the introduction paragraph. So the introduction paragraph is valuable. It's invaluable for the reliability and the legitimacy of your claim from a reader's perspective. Okay, so don't overlook the introduction. They can be tricky to write. They're challenging. They are challenging, but you want to take that time to really situate and frame your argument within that background context. Okay, if you have questions about that and you need, some assistance, of course, definitely reach out to me and I can maybe provide you some help with that, some guidelines or some insight. So following that, of course, is the thesis statement, and then from that, of course, is the paragraphing of your research paper. Each paragraph that follows the introduction with thesis is going to be a paragraph, should ideally be a paragraph of support. Now, it may, at some point you will deal with the counter argument, but even that is going to be a counter argument in light of your argument. So you'll be using the counter argument as in a way, a point of support for your claim, if that makes sense. I can explain more in a moment. But so you have your paragraphing, and each of those paragraphs is going to provide evidence, and that evidence is going to come from your sources. So the evidence that you discuss in your paragraphing should be in direct support of your thesis statement. Everything goes back to the thesis statement. you're going to hear me say this, it's very easy to digress from the thesis statement through your paragraph. And you start off in one way, and then you end up over here when you should be going straight. It's a straight line from thesis to conclusion. Introduction to conclusion should be a straight line. We want to avoid any digression. So the paragraphing needs to be rooted in that thesis and needs to be supporting that thesis and should be providing evidence from your sources in support of that thesis. And of course, as I said, your counter argument will be included in there at some point. And it's with an acknowledgement. It's with some sort of concession. You know, I'll give you that point. Yes, your argument on this is reasonable. However, so that counter argument is used in a way as support for your argument because you're throwing in that however. I agree here, however, I disagree here. And this is where in my disagreement that I'm going to stress my support for my thesis in counter to your argument. So it's this counterpoint between your argument and your opponent's argument, or this group and this group. There's a counterpoint between the two. You using their argument against themselves in a way to support your argument through a rebuttal. You say this, however, I say this. And an acknowledgement shows goodwill, as we mentioned in the previous video. That acknowledgement and that concession to certain points shows the goodwill, provides or creates credibility on your part, shows that you're in a way honorable, you have integrity as a researcher, you have integrity as a writer, and you're willing to acknowledge a good point when there is a good point, and when a good point is worthy of acknowledgement. That makes you look good as a writer. And so do that to your advantage. Find that counterpoint, or you can even, as I said previously, a hypothetical counterargument. You may not find a specifically explicit, blatant counterargument stated somewhere, but you can be hypothetical about it and say, one might say this, one could disagree here on this point, but one would overlook ABC or whatever point you may use. So using their counterargument to your advantage by providing further evidence and further support to refute their counterargument. But with that acknowledgement that it is a valid point, okay? And then further, an appeal to the reader. You want to make some kind of an appeal. Once you've gone through this evidence and once you've gone through these counterarguments, once you've supported your thesis, you want to appeal to the reader through logic and through their values, an appeal to their logic and appeal to their values to accept your argument. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be a life and death acceptance. It's not. It could just be they just need to consider it. It doesn't necessarily have to be you have to believe this or you have to agree with me, because if you don't, there's going to be dire consequences to whatever, the economy is going to completely fall apart, or whatever, there's some catastrophic consequences to not agreeing with what I say. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. It could just be that the reader would at least acknowledge what you were arguing. Okay, I acknowledge that. I agree with that. I can see where you're coming from. Where you have acknowledged the counterpoint, they would in turn acknowledge your point. That's what we're after. We want the reader to fully agree. We want the reader to buy in to what we're arguing and to, in a sense, gain their acceptance of what we're arguing. But even just an acknowledgement and a degree of acceptance is what we want at a very minimum. Okay, so an appeal to the reader is a way to gain that, and then that would ultimately lead into a conclusion of the thesis, a conclusion of what you've been supporting and arguing throughout the paper. Therefore, one can reasonably conclude that ABC is a logical, reasonable conclusion and claim to make regarding X, Y, Z situation. Okay, so the conclusion is a conclusion of your thesis statement. It's a conclusion of everything that you said in your paper. It's a summation of that, and it's showing the reader, here it is. This is what we can conclude. Based on everything I've just said, we can conclude this, and this is why this is reasonable. Okay, so that's what we're after in an argument paper. In just a general sense, there are exceptions, there are other features. These are just, I think, the main ones to consider for an effective and successful paper. Okay, so then what is a research paper? What does that mean? Well, research, of course, is the key term here. Research. You can write an opinion essay, which is just based on your opinion. You can write an observation essay, which is based on what you've observed. You can write a critique of something based on a criteria that you've developed. We see critiques a lot. We see we're in a culture of writing reviews. Everybody writes a review, from the technology they buy to the shows they watch to the food they eat. We're very familiar with writing critiques and reviews. But this type of writing requires actual scholarly research, where we would actually go into a library, or in our case, go into an online library, such as Annie Gabriel, and find actual sources of support, evidence that will support our particular topic and particular position that we've taken on that topic. There are thousands of sources, hundreds of thousands of sources available to you. It's a sea of information to sift through, depending on where you go, depending on what topic you take, what direction you take in your research. So our goal is to find credible scholarly sources. Credible scholarly sources, that means that these are peer-reviewed, they are vetted, they are published by credible institutions of research, which would mean such as Harvard University, Yale University, Chicago University, or University of Chicago, UCR, UC Berkeley, Stanford. These type of research universities, even the Cal States, the state system, any research university or university that publishes research is going to be a scholarly source. Now that doesn't mean that, say X professor or Dr. X, Dr. whoever might go out on their own and write something, and then it's published independently through a independent publisher. There may be some questionability as far as that particular source, perhaps, depending on who that person is, what their background is, what their credibility is, what previous research they may have done in the past, what's the reputation of the publisher that they're using now. But typically, say like Oxford University in the UK, Oxford University Press, that is a credible source. Something that comes out of that university is a credible source. Something that comes out of UCLA, Stanford, these types of well-known, reputable publishing houses, publishing universities that are known for their research. That's what we're looking for. So online sources, .com sources, sources that are free, really are in question as far as credibility, because they inherently have bias. They're for mass consumption. They're not geared to a specific academic audience. They're more, I would say, anecdotal sources rather than actual scholarly. You can use them, .com sources, for anecdotal purposes, but they really don't serve a greater academic scholarly purpose. But you can use them to kind of provide, maybe insight into the common viewpoint of a specific topic out there, the consumable view of a particular issue, and then you can contrast that with the scholarly, critical, more intellectual, more analytical view from a university press. But yes, so credible sources, evidence, that's what a research paper is really, that's the key feature there, that research element. is what we're after. And it is a skill. It takes time to acquaint yourself with the library, to be able to find those sources. Be careful not to eat up too much time. It can be very time consuming going through the databases there in the library. So I do have a few here that you can keep in mind. Sources in the library, you have two typical options: actual books, periodicals that are in print in the library, and then you have the databases, which is primarily, I think, what you're going to be familiarizing yourself online. So the databases are scholarly journals from various publishers, various reputable scholarly publishers, where you can find any given article on a given topic for a given subject, and then utilize as a source for your paper. I have three here listed just for your own convenience. For an encyclopedic type reference is the Gale Reference Library. It can be kind of compared to a scholarly Wikipedia type source. You can use that as a starting point to get an overall idea of a particular topic. If you go into Gale Reference Library in the databases on the Annie Gabriel Library, it will give you an overview of the particular subject matter that you want to deal with. So then with that, you would take that information and follow up with more deeper research in the actual journal articles. There's two databases that I think are easy to navigate through. That's Academic Search Premier and JSTOR. That's JSTOR. Those two, I think, are very user-friendly to find the information you need. There's also OneSearch. That's also very user-friendly. However, you have to be very specific in your search terms. Otherwise, you're going to get 10,000 articles to go through. So be very aware of dates. Be very aware of keywords in your search through the databases, and otherwise you can burn up a lot of time. Books are acceptable, but you might just find one chapter in a book. Don't try to read a whole book for necessarily a 10-page research paper in an 8-week class. Find a book. If you find a book that you like, there may be one chapter in that book. There may be part of a chapter in that book that you can use. To really narrow things down in books, make sure you're looking through the table of contents and the index for key terms that correlate to your topic. Okay. Otherwise, you might check out a book that's 300 pages and you may think, oh, I have to read this whole thing. No, you don't. You just need to find the information that is applicable to your paper, but you have to really be careful to not invest too much time. But the table of contents and the index are going to really help you narrow things down for that book. So again, this is just an overview, just briefly, of what we're going through for this week. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know. I'll be happy to clarify. We're going to be kind of refining this as we go through. So we're going to be looking at the annotated bibliography, which is going to be actual sources that you will find in the library, and then writing a bibliography on them. That's coming up, I believe, next week. So more on research and library navigation. Okay, well, we're going to end it here for this week. Again, if you have any questions, please let me know and I'll clarify any details. But yeah, good luck on the work, and we appreciate your time. Thank you.